All right, so if you've seen my video about understanding and constructing complex tenses, then you should understand that when you add multiple tenses together, like we want to do here, all you do is add together the individual meanings of the tenses, the way that you would add ingredients to a salad or to a pizza or to a sandwich or to a Asian stir fry or something. You have separate elements added together so that you have the individual meanings of all of those elements, just the way you have the individual flavors of all the elements on a pizza, for example. You have individual flavor of pepperoni, an individual flavor of mushrooms, individual flavor of sausage, for example. And you taste all of those things together. They are separate things, but you taste all of them together. It gives it a unique flavor altogether, and it's the same way with tenses. You add the separate meanings together. It gives you an overall unique flavor. So what unique flavor do we get when we add the perfect and the continuous together in the present is the thing that we're thinking about now. So let's do just a short review of the meanings, all of the things that we're adding together. If you want more info about all that, look at the individual videos on the tenses and the video about understanding tenses and constructing them. So what do we have when we have the perfect continuous? We have the present tense, which is our simple time meaning. And to that, we have added the perfect, which tells us in the present, which will tell us that we have a result that is still developing. And we're going to add also the continuous, which by itself means that the activity of the verb is temporary. By itself it means that. But there's a problem with that, with understanding that way if we already have the perfect. Because if you add the perfect, this also makes the activity of the verb temporary, just logically. So this meaning isn't really being added anymore. Really, the whole point of this discussion is to think about what is added when we do add the continuous. So that's what we're going to think about. So this is the normal meaning that the activity of the verb is temporary. When we add it to the continuous, we get the meaning that the verb, we get the meaning of like the name of the tense. We get the meaning that the verb has not stopped from the time that it started up until the present. And since it's present continuous, there's the present continuous part of this present perfect continuous total thing, then it will also have to continue. So that means it's happening now. The activity of the verb is happening now, and it hasn't stopped from the time it started. So let's look at some examples. Well, first, what do we need to do here? What do we really need to understand? We need to understand the difference between the perfect alone and perfect plus continuous. This is really the interesting difference. Why is this the interesting difference? The reason is because we have less of a choice with the perfect than we do with a continuous, or we can decide to not add the continuous, but we can't decide not to add the perfect. The continuous is basically always optional. And actually, depending on your level, for most of you, I just recommend not using the perfect continuous. And you'll see why. It is going to add a very small amount of extra meaning to our total verb meaning, which is actually this meaning right here. And most of the time, I think it will not be, I mean, it'll basically never be totally necessary. And most of the time, it won't be even important at all to add this meaning to what you're saying overall. So, again, continuous is always optional. Never really needed. Okay, but if we have a result that is still developing for a present perfect kind of situation, then we have no choice. If you do, you have to include the perfect, and if you don't, it's just wrong. Okay, so you have a choice. You can leave out the continuous, but if you have a situation with a developing result, then you just don't have a choice. You have to use the perfect in that situation. So the real question is, well, the situation alone will tell you if you need the perfect or not. Or you can say it will tell you, or you can say it will determine. It will make it that way. And so there's nothing you can do about that. You just have the situation, you need to talk about the right way, so you need to include the perfect. Okay. But it's not the same way for the continuous. This has to do with, you might think, okay, well, why in other cases is it necessary to use a continuous? And it's for this reason that I mentioned earlier, which is that perfect by itself makes a situation temporary. So if you look at the videos about the continuous and some of the things I've written about the continuous, when you have to use the continuous, it's because it is necessary to talk about the thing that you're talking about in a temporary way. It's important to make this distinction between something that is temporary and not temporary. And if it's necessary logically to say that something is temporary, then you need the continuous. This is not true, though, if you already have the perfect tense. If you already have the perfect tense, then the perfect tense also makes the activity of the verb temporary. So that's why you have this difference here. So that makes adding the continuous not necessary when you already have the perfect. Okay, so it's optional. Okay, I guess I'm kind of saying the same thing again, but again, the continuous is optional if you already have the perfect, because again, the perfect is already making the thing temporary. All right, so that's complicated, but the main point here is that this is just the interesting question that we need to ask. What's the difference between the perfect alone and the perfect continuous? So what is the difference? Let's look at some examples now. All right. So let's think of some scenarios, some situation. Scenario one. Scenario one, we have two lessons. You have two lessons with, let's say you have two lessons with me or with your teacher in one day. One morning, say 9 to 10:30, and one evening, which will be, say, 5 to 6:30. Okay, in this scenario, let's do it like this. Two lessons. Okay. We've already done the first lesson. And also, it's 12 noon. And we're writing to each other. Not talking. We talk during the lesson. And we're just writing, I don't know, Skype message or something, whatever. Some kind of phone message or Skype message. Facebook, whatever it is. Okay. Message. So it's not talking. All right. So the question is, in this scenario, what do we need to say? Okay. Should we use the perfect? Or perfect continuous? Can we use which of these can we use? All right. Let's ask all questions. Can we use just make sure this part of it's clear? Can we just use the continuous by itself? Can we use the perfect by itself, or can we use the perfect continuous? Okay, so the first would be we are talking. Oh, and by the way, what do we need to say? What we want to say? We want to say how long we've talked so far that day. Okay, so we have 180 minutes total that we want to talk. 90 in the morning, 90 in the evening. It's 12 noon. We're sending each other a message. We want to say how long we've talked so far that day. So, could we say we were talking for 90 minutes today? No, this is nonsense because we're not talking at that moment. So it's not true at that moment, which is what we need for the continuous. Or it needs to be true now, and this is not true now. So not true now. And we have a result here. Also, we have a result that is still developing, which is what you want to understand about when you use the present perfect. And so the continuous meaning doesn't fit here, and we also need the perfect meaning. So from this we know that it shouldn't be the continuous, and it doesn't have to be the perfect. So, but we can still ask the question, some questions about this. All right, so let's do the perfect alone by itself. We have talked for 90 minutes today. So is that right? Yeah, that's fine. There's no problem with that. We don't need to use a continuous for the reason that we talked about before. All right, and what is that? Continuous is needed when we need to make it clear that the activity of the verb is temporary. If we use the perfect, the activity of the verb is already temporary. All right? So that's okay. Could we say we have been talking for 90 minutes today? Okay, actually, no, you can't say that. Why? Because, do you remember what we said over here? If we add the continuous to the meaning of the perfect, then we say that the thing has not stopped from the time that it started and is happening now and will happen beyond now. Let's put this in here specifically too. And so that's not the case here. It's not happening now. And it has stopped. We stopped at 10:30. We're not going to talk again until 5. So this is a pretty good example of when you should not use the perfect continuous. Now, I'll say it again. The simplest way for you to solve this problem is just never use the perfect continuous. It's a very tiny amount of meaning that is added. Now, there might be some situations where you really want to clarify in that way what the situation is by including the continuous, but it's hard to think of very many. It's really shouldn't be a priority. If this is causing problems in your speech, then I would say just totally leave it out, and nobody's going to hear a big difference in the quality of your speech by leaving it out. The bigger problem is most likely going to be using it incorrectly. Okay, so why is because has stopped and is not happening, nor will it continue beyond past the present. All right, so let's take this same scenario. Let's do all this from one scenario. And here's just going to be a okay, so let's talk about a different moment in the same scenario. Let's do this. All right. So here's one time in that scenario. And let's talk about a different time in that scenario. Let's talk about at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. morning in the first lesson. And we want to say again how long we've talked that day. So, again, what can we say? Cross this out. Well, in a second. So what do we need to say? Can we use the continuous? No, for the same reason. Now, well, almost the same reason. So in this case, the continuous meaning does fit because it is something happening right at that moment. Oh, it's not 90 minutes now, it's 60 minutes, right? So because 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., 60 minutes, 1 hour. All right, so continuous meaning does fit here because it is something that's happening right at that temporary thing happening right at the moment that's being spoken of. But we have the problem that we had in the last one, which is that we have a result that's still developing. And so we can't say that in this case. That's the reason. All right, can we say we have talked for 60 minutes? Yes, we can't say that because, well, I've told you a few times already that you basically never need to have the continuous, and we know we need the perfect because we have a result still developing. I already said that, I won't write it again. And so the important difference, so far it's the same. We couldn't use a continuous here, can't use a continuous here, could use a perfect here, we could use a perfect, or we have to use a perfect in both places. So what about here? We have been talking for 60 minutes. So yes, we can use it in this case. So what's the difference? Well, here again, it hasn't stopped from the time that it started. We started talking at 9. It's 10 o'clock. We're talking about this thing that's happening. Still, it started at 9. Just talking. Continued all the way until 10. Didn't stop. And is still happening at that moment. Basically started and hasn't stopped. Okay. And this is really the only thing that, the only difference between the two things, the only difference between the perfect by itself and the perfect and the continuous together, is that if you use the perfect and the continuous together, an important question, remember, then you say that the verb hasn't stopped from the time that it started and that it's still happening at that moment in the present. If that is not true, as it was in this case, like at 12 noon, it had stopped at 10:30 and was not going to start again until 5. And so the conditions that we need, not stopped and still happening, are not met. And so we cannot use perfect and continuous in that case. In this case, those conditions are met and we can't use it. So that's what you want to get about. Yes, thanks for being here.